Welcome back, y'all. This is my second time recording this because that first time fucked up, but let's listen to this music real quick. The music? Okay, fuck me, I guess. Maybe just on transit. Any Hoosers, I wanted to quickly talk about 1984 today. I recently, I'll say it like I said it in the last video. I didn't read it per se, but I did listen to the audiobook, which, yes, Gooners, that is good enough. Also, the guy reading the book, I can put down in the description if you want, was definitely a good orator. So I do recommend listening to it that way. But I wanted to get on here and say, I guess, two things, or talk about two things. That being the characters in the book, and two, how the book has some sort of reflection or parallel to our current situation today. So first, I wanted to, I guess, name the two characters. I don't remember the second character. But if you, read the book, or you can just look it up. He has a quote-unquote friend. A better way of saying it is an acquaintance that he is used to, or that he conversates with a lot. They call each other comrades in the book, of course. So everyone's comrade, even your wife would be comrade. But generally speaking, people aren't really friends. But this is someone that he is more or less not terribly ill fond of, I guess you could say. That being Symes, and then he has a neighbor, which I would not say considers a good acquaintance. In fact, he's probably more afraid of him because he is definitely much more of a bootlicker in this circumstance. But generally speaking, if you understand the concept of 1984, it's a surveillance state, it's a dystopia. But generally speaking, this book has an interesting concept, meaning it's a as Orwell would like to construct in his writings. It is a post-truth society, right? The key idea being that you can't really dissect truth in the traditional sense, because it is either lost or muddied, or deliberately exchanged for some sort of comfortability or a one state solution. In this circumstance, it is a party favor, meaning the idea that whatever ideas you may have must align with the centralized party, and anything outside of that is heresy. And so it is an interesting book where you have characters, a numerous amount of characters that are so deep in the sauce, not even lost in the sauce, just literally deep and sunken at the bottom. But at the same time, you have what I refer to as you will eat your neighbors, you will eat your neighbor's dilemma. So the interesting part about this book, in my opinion, is not so much the dystopia, because the dystopia is interesting, generally speaking. I would say, realistically speaking, the most interesting part about it is the language dilemma, which I think is a really, really good addition to the book, and it really sells you on the idea of what it means to be a dystopia, and those kinds of things, because of the deliberate reconstruction of truth, and what it means to actually understand something, critically think, which obviously has been barred in the book. Not illegal per se, but it is a crime, which is, I guess, I don't know, doublethink in a sense. But the point I'm getting at is you have a lot of people who are unbelievably so deep in the sauce that they can't even really conceptualize that they're deep in the sauce, right? But the problem is that you would expect all of these people to be stupid, right? You would expect all of these people to just be, people who have no brains, and who have never been brought up to critically think. But the reality is, in this book, right, when he's referencing the time frame, he's an older man, right? And it's interesting because he actually has an attempt in the book to talk to another person who is definitely a different class from him, which is in itself in its own conversation. But someone who is not of his nature, of his, you know, his elements. Like, he is not the same kind of person as them with regards to how society views him and the rules that are applied to him and such and such. But he goes to talk to someone who is also, in this case, way older than him, who has been in, you know, been on the planet since long before what they call the revolution, right? Since long before the party got its grips on the nation, and you know, the international conflicts were a thing, and you know, all those kinds of things. And so he he tries to get a reference things for things, but he can't. Like he remembers being young and, you know, existing before the revolution and this and that, but he can't ever really piece things together to the point where, you know, he can really remember what life was like before the dystopia. And so it's interesting because he's trying to elucidate ideas, and it's the same thing with the journal. It's really difficult for him to conceptualize and to think about what's happening, right? And so him, and I think a good way of explaining this, or I guess saying this, is like, he's an average Joe. He's supposed to be a representation of you and I, right? Someone who's not particularly bright, not particularly skilled or attractive or anything like that. He just is a bloke. And so it's contrasted to, I would say, two other characters that are the sort of the polarity of mediocrity. Meaning you have one that's a complete idiot, at least intellectually, and then you have another one that's very, very smart. Those being his neighbor, the idiot, and Symes, his acquaintance, that is intelligent. He's a thinker, right? And that becomes a problem. Symes is, and if you know anything about the book, the construction of language or newspeak is an important part of the book, and the way that they are trying to monitor and alter and change the way that people perceive life, and the party, the way that people literally speak and think, is integral to the way that the party functions. And so this man Symes is literally on a board. He's basically a person. His job is to make the Newspeak dictionary, meaning define new words that support the party, and change every word to remove nuance and remove all of the things that make them special, and take all of the value out of it except for what can be politically utilized to support the party, and thwart any efforts to critically think about it and or explore other ideas. This is literally a man who is, his job is literally to take words out of the dictionary, remove them and replace them, or seriously disable them so that they can't be used philosophically or politically. So this is an intelligent person. This is a guy who literally, he spends his free time thinking about the way that words work, and the fun of, to him, the fun of figuring out how to take, okay, how to take, that was kind of horseshit, I'm not gonna fucking lie. His job is to take all of the value out of a word and, you know, use it as propaganda. And so the problem is that this guy is very intelligent. And so Winston in the book recognizes that this is a problem. He recognizes, we're gonna start another one and just do a quick little match. Generally speaking, it is more profitable if you just buy the knuckles and then use the knuckles, because, like, you know, you get insta kills up until around, like, I don't know, 13 or some shit. Here's the music. I guess it goes away in solo pretty quickly. But generally speaking, his job is to literally rewrite the dictionary. But he's an intelligent person, and so Winston recognizes they don't like that. The party and the people in power don't like that he's intelligent. Despite him being a brown nose, despite him being a bootlegger, a simp for the party, that he recognizes intrinsically that that guy isn't going to last long, because they don't value intelligence. They value following the party. They value obedience, right? Utmost obedience. And so it's interesting because this is the concept I would like to get across to people, is not only will you eat your own neighbors, you won't even realize that your neighbors are edible, right? Because the people, and that sounds bad, but the people that are not just in power, but in general, right? Society, people aren't going to live up to your ideas. People and people, you aren't going to live up to other people's ideas, right? Their ideals, the way the world works, how laws should be written, or this and that. And so there's always going to be some sort of conflict that you can't really manage because you don't really see it as a problem, right? You wouldn't think that something that we could all agree on is actually a problem until it comes up, right? And so what ends up happening is people disagree and they disagree, and violence ends up happening. But in this scenario, it's a dystopia, right? So he's in an environment in which there is only one idea. There is only the status quo. There is and only ever was the party. And so the problem here is that him, Symes, being intelligent means that he has the capacity, he has the ability to critically think. Despite him being an actual simp for the party, right, politically and in every way, it's so much to the point where he would sell out his own friend, his own comrade, to the party if he finds that, he was doing something against the party's interest. It is the easiest way of saying it. Despite being a person who would sell out his own friend, his own family member, right, as you can come to see in the book, which is important to the next character. Despite being all those things, despite being an absolute simp, he is still too smart for the government. So they have to get him. And eventually in the book, they do get him. And in the book, of course, when they get people, they don't announce it, right? This person just doesn't show up for work one day, and they doesn't show up for work the next day, and then people are just like, okay, I guess he never existed. And so it's interesting because someone who is literally in the active process of rewriting the script, rewriting the way that people think, his job is literally to make sure that people are unable to use old words and nuance to be able to critically think about the way that the world works or the government. They still get his ass, right? And then they have his neighbor, right? Winston, the main character, his neighbor, has children, right? And in the book, the children are just, by and large, are described as just these vile little creatures that just will sell you out the instant they get a chance. And they're just little terrorists is a good way of saying it, because all they have ever known is the propaganda, right? Like Winston and other people that grew up, before the wars and or the revolution. I mean, they they have some sort of semblance of, like, not just old language but old thinking, right? But new children are new, so they don't know anything except the propaganda that they've been fed. And so they have these little terrorists going around literally reporting their parents to the government to be sent off either to labor camps or to be killed, because the thing that they said was against the government. And so that is what ends up happening to what's it called? This Winston's neighbor. Is he? Don't kill me. Cool. Winston's neighbor, who, like the guy before, Symes, is very for the government. This guy is also an extreme bootlicker. This guy can't get enough of the party, loves the party, loves that his children are trying to report people to the party to get them killed. He loves that his children, like, he admires it, like he feels like a proud dad seeing that his children are so pro-party, right? And this guy's an idiot, right? It's described in the book, or at least he's not really intelligent. He's not necessarily, I don't know, he's dumber than Winston, but by contrast to Symes, the intelligent person who understands, literature and language and stuff like that, is definitely like a Neanderthal. And so it's interesting because this guy, who is a complete idiot, has no brain cells other than what the party wants him to think. This guy is, oh no. This guy is eventually caught lacking. So what ends up happening in the book is he has a dream, right? And in the dream, he basically says something that was against the party, despite not being conscious, not being awake. He accidentally says something, right? As described in the, oh my god, as it's described in the book, your biggest enemy is your nervous system. It is the things that you can't control, because it eventually gets you killed. And so what ends up happening is his kids report him to the government, and they get his ass killed. And so the point I'm getting at here is you have two characters, right? You have the middle character, the main character, Winston, somewhere in the middle where, he's not an idiot, he's not a super intellectual, um, but he has a brain. And then you have the sort of polar opposites where you have a complete idiot and you have a really smart dude, but they both support the party. They both get killed. They both disappear, right? They both are removed from society and either sent to a labor camp or killed. And so the point I'm getting at here is it doesn't matter how pro party you are, unless you are feeding, unless you are eating and shitting and breathing and thinking and pumping blood, the shit that they are spewing out, they will always come for you, right? And so the point I'm getting at here is that is how society works. And obviously within terrible political systems, it is exacerbated. Obviously, people are going to always disagree on things, but in situations like we have here in the United States, it gets a lot worse than that, because the things that you disagree on aren't just like dystopian. It's on a slippery edge where you feel like it's something that kind of makes sense, but the reality is that it doesn't. A good example is the situation in Palestine with regards to Israel, right? The sad truth is, although a lot of people would like to think that things are in the past and they're not really present today, that's just not really how it works. There are still things that affect us today, right? There are still anti-Semites. There are still people that are weird and fucking don't like Jews. But the reality is that just because your group of people were systemically oppressed, don't get me wrong, people did terrible things to Jews, but just because your group was systemically oppressed does not give you the right to go and oppress other people. And so you have this breaking down of language, right, with the word anti-Semitism, which has lost all of its nuance in modern conversation because people are exploiting a tragedy and using it politically without having any real justification. They're justifying genocide, apartheid, human rights violations. Like, they're justifying a lot of things and just saying, okay, if you critically think about it, if you even dare think about something that is anti-establishment, anti-status quo, you're anti-Semitic. And so they have a complete deconstruction of what these words means, what the nuance of the situation, going back literally decades, and people feed into it. They feed the nonsense. But the problem is then you have other people that aren't complete brain dead zombies, and they say, wait, hold up. Wait, I'm not sure I completely 100% agree with the thing that you said. Even though I'm with you 90% of the time, that 10% was a little sus. I'm not sure if I agree with that. Banned. Get his ass. Send his ass to the fucking gulag. He's gone. Get him out of here. Fucking zip tie his ass and throw him down the fucking river. And that's the reality of the situation, is that it doesn't matter how fucking hand salute you are to the fucking status quo and all the other nonsense. Someone's gonna get your ass eventually. And that's just, oh, I already had the gun. Someone's gonna get your ass eventually. And so that's what I mean when I say that you will eat your neighbor. It doesn't matter how much of a crazy fucking freakazoid you are. There's always gonna be some radical, some fucking weirdo that's more weird than you. And they will fucking send you to the fucking gulag. And it's terrible. But that's just sort of the reality that we live in. That's pretty much what I wanted to say with regards to those characters. You can be a complete idiot. You can be an intellectual. Doesn't matter. They're still going to get your ass. And then as far as the, reflection on the book compared to, or in parallel to what we're living through today, I would say, generally speaking, obviously, the Palantir situation is getting a bit scary. I don't know too much about it, so I can't particularly comment on it. But in general, surveillance states and surveillance of your people is always wrong. I understand the idea of protection and wanting to have more information is always going to be good. except for the fact that you can never trust the government, and everything in their power is always going to be exploited to its fullest extent. That's just how they work, because these people don't have any fucking souls. Um, and they're all like 80 years old and geriatric. Like, it's terrible. But generally speaking, any power you give to the government, they're not going to relinquish. It's got to be, you got to buy them to get it back, and then in other scenarios, it just gets a lot of people hurt or killed, and rights taken away and all this other fucking nonsense. So, obviously there's that situation. But I would say, just generally speaking, you have a slow erosion of not even just democracy. I wouldn't even really call it democracy, because I don't think, your vote matters and this and that. You can call that a political take, but I would say, generally speaking, it's more of a, I have a brain and I can look in front of me and recognize that year after year, shit doesn't really get better no matter who you put into the fucking pit, right? But I don't know, generally speaking, you can look at your situation and say, oh, this isn't particularly getting better, right? I think the shit that they're feeding, the slop that they're feeding us, is just that. It's fucking slop. It makes no sense. It's fucking, it's nonsense, literally. Like, the shit that they're saying, spewing out, and trying to feed me, it just doesn't fucking work. And so, I think a good way to sort of end this off is just kind of protect your mind. There's gonna be a lot of shit, a lot of surveillance, a lot of people spewing dumb shit. Protect your capacity to think. Try to be critical. Yes, even of that person, even of those people, even of that idea, because you're gonna get caught slipping at one point, and that's just sort of the reality, right? There's a saying like, no one's immune to propaganda, and I do think that's true, but there is a way to curb it, right? There is a way to mitigate, the dumb shit that you're falling for, and that is to critically think. That is to celebrate the idea that you are an individual, and that you don't have to pledge your fucking allegiance to these genocidal cultists and this and that. And so, you can pick up a book. You can pick up a little, I don't know, poetry or some shit. To take a look at what people have been saying throughout the years, and get a sense of where you're at, not just for your side of things, but where society is actually heading down the road. And it'll give you a better sort of perspective of the world that you're living in today. Other than that, I mean, it's just one book. I'd like to think, and I guess a good way of saying it is, Orwell himself describes it as a warning, not a prediction. And I think that's a good way of thinking about it. While it may be a bit optimistic, I think it's decent, because I think it's incredibly difficult to actually control, especially in the manner that they have in that book, to control a lot of people in that way. And so I would say that's where we sort of thrive, is that it is incredibly unrealistic. It is realistic in the sense that people are incredibly fucking dumb, and they fall for absolute nonsense. But generally speaking, the I don't know, the intensity of that situation is definitely a bit out there. So I would say, if we want to avoid those situations, again, pick up a book, critically think, try to get a couple ideas in your head flowing. The ones that you have right now probably aren't good enough. I don't mean that personally. I mean that in the sense of, like, if you're not learning, if you're not growing, you're slowing. So take a second, just think about it. Other than that, I really appreciate you all showing up. If you like this, or if you want to see any more of it. I thought I was gonna die there. Drop it a like, give a follow. Other than that, I appreciate it, and I will see y'all in the next one.